Hey everybody, Coach Sean, the Rip Grandpa. Inside today's video, I want to talk about the sugar diet. It's catching steam in popularity, and over the weekend in my downtime, I did some research and I want to share with you how I'm going to experiment with this diet and why I made a decision to experiment with a higher carb diet like this. So today we'll talk about what is the sugar diet? Is it legit? Does it work? And the reason it caught my interest so quickly is because it does kind of rhyme with my Rip Grandpa carb cycling. So I'm going to talk more about that in a second. Because at the end of the day, the best diet to follow is one that you could adhere to and sustain for the long haul. So this is another reason this caught my interest. Seems like the adherence and sustainability with this would be much, much easier than the low carb cult out there. Now, nothing wrong with low carb. I'll talk about this in a second. I just see the pitfalls of it. And this is why I embraced carb cycling over 2 decades ago. And in some form or fashion, I do have abs year round. Sometimes the lower ones are hiding a little bit more, depending on if I'm on a bulk or a cutting cycle. But using carb cycling, I've stayed ripped for almost 2 decades now. And so what I always like to do, see if I can pull up these pictures. Yeah, here it is, 10-year progress. Yeah, right here. So I'll slide this in front. So you can kind of see here. Let me get the size of this down. You can see here, this is me at 40 years old, then 41, 44, 46, 48, 50. I staying lean year round. Okay. Now I do this with carb cycling because that's the easiest way to sustain and adhere to something ongoing. You're not going to go the rest of your life without eating carbs. Let's just make it part of the plan. So when I saw this diet, it really started intriguing me because of the philosophies that rhymed with my RG carb cycling. So before we talk about that, the 2 guys that deserve the credit here are Cole Robinson and Mark Smelly Belly. I'm almost positive that was his name. Cole screams and yells at you, calls you a fatty, and it's very hard to watch his video for longer than 4 or 5 minutes at a time without it just gets annoying. I think he's awesome. I love his enthusiasm and I like how he gets into character. But I stumbled across Mark, who takes Cole's information, implements it into his own program, and then shares his results and how he's doing it. And between these 2 guys, I've come up with the framework, and I'm going to go over the exact typical day that I use here in a second. But first, before we dive into this, the reason that this rhymes with carb cycling so well, because I've always talked about in the presence of high fat intake, you want to keep starches and sugars lower, because starches and sugars trigger insulin spikes. Okay, now, yes, you can get insulin spikes from red meat. We might talk about that here in a second as well. But just saying, carbs in general, especially fast-releasing sugary carbs like rice or potatoes or fruits, for example. I know they have the antidote of fiber in there, but the reality is that this is going to create a higher, faster insulin spike and potentially a longer insulin spike than other foods. And if a bunch of fat is present at the same time, because insulin is a storage hormone, your chances of storing that fat do increase. And so my simple philosophy from a 2-pronged approach is just when fats are up, carbs are down, and when carbs are up, fats are down. And I've lived by that philosophy. You can see here, I'll slide this over. This, fats up, carbs down, right here. Fats up, carbs down, carbs up, fats down. And I followed that philosophy for years now. And there's 2 things that happen here. Number one, you're way more likely to keep your body in a fat-burning environment. So if I'm going to have a fatty ribeye, for example, I'm not going to have a potato or some rice or a starchy vegetable with that. And if I want the starchy vegetable, the rice or the potato or whatever it may be, fruit or whatever it is, I'm going to choose a leaner cut. And that's what this program is all about. Your fats are almost at 0 completely. So we'll talk about the food sources here more in a second. But this is where the problem with keto, carnivore, and paleo come in, because what ends up happening is fats could be making you fatter. And I have a great example, a client, Mike, I won't share his last name, I believe he's from Orlando, Florida area, who came to us. And of course, the first thing I do is I put people on a carb cycling diet unless they have some other type of limitation or restriction that doesn't allow it. And Mike was huge on friendly fats. He loved his olive oil every day. He loved his avocado, and he loved his nuts and seeds, snacking on them between meals. And of course, about 2 weeks in, he's pissed off because he wasn't dropping weight because we're carb cycling. And of course, when we add the starches into the plan, we have to manipulate the other macronutrients at the same time. If starches are going to go up and fruits are going to go up, we need to get fats down. Protein's always going to stay very adequate. So with that being said, Mike was having like 4 avocados a day. He was doing like 6 or 7 tablespoons of olive oil. And then he was snacking on those nuts and seeds between the meals. And now once I discovered this, I immediately told him, like, dude, you're like, that's 700 calories in surplus every single day. I don't care how healthy these fats are. You're never going to lose any weight because they're just so calorie condensed because, again, fats yield 9 calories per gram. Carbs and protein only yield 4. So theoretically, if you cut out fats, you can almost double your carb intake and have the same calorie intake, but you're eating twice the food volume. And that's one of the things that I really like about this. If we think about food volume in general, see, so if we take like 3 Oreos, for example, that's a combination of sugar and fat. That's a bad combination, right? And you take the same amount of calories in strawberries, you have about 2 cups. So you have a full bag of strawberries, and then you have this little tiny 3 Oreos. You know what? I have an image here I'm going to share with you guys. Give me 1 second. I'm going to share this because I think this really drives it home. So you can see here if we're doing like 100 calorie snack comparisons, right? Little bowl of chips and pretzels and nuts. See how small the nuts are? This looks like a snack mix, goldfish here. And look at how much food volume you can have with the same calories. So we call this portion volumization. And this is I think one of the main mechanisms that really makes this plan work well is because you just get to eat more so you're never hungry. So with Mike, we got him down to 1 avocado a day. I told him 1 tablespoon of olive oil on a salad and cut out all the nuts and seeds, and bam. 1 week later, Mike's down 5 because he was overeating fats. Not that they're not friendly for you. And this is in my opinion, this is the problem with low carb, no matter what it is. If you love keto, you love carnivore, you love paleo, you love Mediterranean, I don't care what it is. If you can sustain it and adhere to it for the long haul, great. But in the presence of all those friendly fats every day, I think it's very hard for you to keep your body in more of a deficit. I mean, simply replacing a ribeye with a filet takes your calories from 12 or 1,300 down to 400 or 500 right there. And then if we replace it with a whiter meat, a leaner meat, like a fish or a chicken or a turkey, now we're reducing it even more by 700, 800 calories. So at the end of the day, choosing leaner cuts is going to save you in the calorie content on a daily basis. Now, there's also new research showing that low carb diets can lead to insulin resistance because what happens is you're cutting out carbs for such extended periods of time, you're making your cells insensitive to glucose. So when you eventually bring glucose back into the plan, whether you're cheating on your diet or you just start eating carbs again, not only do you hold 3 grams of water for every gram of carb you consume, right? The chances of your cells being less sensitive to glucose, you bring that back in and your cells are now insensitive to the glucose. So your insulin doesn't respond the right way to clear out the glucose out of your system. And of course, this leads to more fat spillover. You add into it the 3 grams of water that we hold for every gram of carb we consume. And now people who go low carb for extended periods of time, they lose weight, they hit stall city or a plateau. Stall city is what Mark and Cole call it. And this plan is designed to get you out of stall city. You hit stall city, and then the second you bring carbs back in, you gain weight because you're gaining water and your cells are now insensitive to glucose. And now you think carbs are the enemy, when really it was the low carb diet that was actually the root cause of that problem. There's more and more research coming out on this that I'll be sharing in future videos. But I just want to throw that out there, that your low carb diet could be making you insulin resistance without you even realizing it. And just to understand how macronutrients in our body works, your body does not store fat from carbs necessarily. Okay, we store fat as fat. That's why it's fat. But what ends up happening is because carbs impact insulin, right? And we tend to overeat carbs, that happens as well. So once our glycogen levels, which is carbs stored as energy inside muscle and liver tissue, once those are full, if we're not consistently depleting and replenishing the glycogen out of our muscle and liver tissue through weight training and cardio or just everyday activity, then yes, when you bring carbs into your body and you're in a surplus, those carbs will spill over and they will lead to fat storage. Now, it will be less fat storage if there's less fat present. So that goes back to my fats up, carbs up, fats down philosophy, protein always in every single meal. I'll talk more about protein in a second, because you're not going to have high protein on this diet. It's going to be medium. It's not going to be really low. I'm going to keep mine around 150 grams a day. So just making note that your body does not store carbs or protein as fat nearly as easy as fat, right? We store fat as fat. And just so you know, you don't burn fat cells. You shrink them. So once you get a fat cell inside your body, it's there forever. It's just the size of that fat cell expands and contracts based on your diet, okay? So hopefully this makes sense. So now, before I dive into why this high sugar diet can work so well and why it seems to be working so well on people, and some of these guys that are high performers like me are eating 400 to 500, sometimes 600, 700, 800 grams of carbs a day, and they're still getting leaner, eating that many carbs. So this is how high their body is burning. And of course, this leads to energy levels that's making them move more as well. So their NEAT goes up, they want to work out more because their energy goes through the roof. And I think that's another problem with keto, paleo, and carnivore, is that you're forcing your body into ketosis. You're forcing your body to try to use ketones. But yet, what does your body do when there's no carbs present or there's no glucose present? What does it do with protein? It converts it into sugar or glucose through gluconeogenesis, because our body's primary fuel source, the body wants to burn glucose as fuel. So when you go into ketosis, you're just manipulating and forcing your body to use an alternate fuel source when the body burns glucose much more efficiently, and only 1 out of every 120 calories you consume from glucose actually gets stored as fat on average. And glucose is the oldest evolutionary fuel on the planet. Now, that will segue into my 3 real world examples here. I know I'm getting long, but I promise you're going to learn if you just hang in there. You're going to see why this makes sense, okay? So the first thing is to get rid of the false belief that carbs make you fat. So here are 3 real-life examples. And then I'll share how I'm eating on this diet and why it works so well. So the first one is Chris Voigt from the Washington State Potato Commission, okay? Now, they tried to remove potatoes, or they did remove potatoes from the school lunch program in Washington State, and he was the head of the Potato Commission, so he got pissed and he protested and he ate nothing but potatoes. 20 potatoes a day for 60 days in a row, okay? This was his results. You can see here he lost over 20 pounds. His starting glucose, cholesterol, triglycerides, and blood pressure all ended outstanding. The guy was eating nothing but 20 potatoes a day for 60 days in a row. So I love this one example because it's not just me cherry picking a study to substantiate a claim that I'm making because I'm biased to carb cycling, because I am biased to carb cycling. I just try to keep an open mind with everything. It's like I say, like, hey, if you can live on keto and paleo or carnivore, more power to you. I just think it's silly to think that you're never going to eat carbs again. So you just might as well incorporate it so that you can build a lifestyle of leanness instead of following these stupid diets that end up ultimately ending up with 94% of people regaining all or more of their weight back. So that's example number 1. The second example is the blue zones. And these are the areas of the world where more people live to 100 than anywhere else in the world. And most of them have a very high carb diet. So I'll pull up the Okinawa one really quick. They're the perfect example because you can see here 67% of their diet is sweet potatoes and 12% is rice. Most of their diet, 70% of their diet, comes from high carb foods. But they live longer, they have less disease, and they are leaner than the rest of the world. Okay, so on a high carb diet. Now, they're probably walking and more active than we are, and they're not eating shit out of a box. Let's be clear here, right? This is stuff like sweet potatoes and rice. Very good fruits, very good sources. But again, it goes to prove the fact that carbs are not responsible for obesity or diseases. Now, I have one more example, and this is the diabetic study, okay? And this really puts the nail in the coffin, because what they did is they took 2 groups of diabetics, and they gave one group high carbs and one group low carbs. Now, here's the context that you need to understand, that protein and calories were created equal with both groups. So they're both consuming the same amount of calories and the same amount of protein, but one group was high carb, one group was low carb. So at the end of that study, you would think that the high carb group, especially being diabetics, it would have been a freaking fat storing nightmare or a health nightmare. But if you look, the health outcomes were almost identical if we look at this, right? Both groups achieved similar completion rates. The weight, blood pressure, fasting glucose, and cholesterol all had the same results from high carb versus low carb because calories and protein, again, were created equal. So I want to just drive this point home. Stop being a carbophobe. Okay, you do not need to be afraid of eating carbs. It's just that when you eat lots of carbs, you want to keep fats to a minimum. That's the secret that most people miss. It's all about keeping fat in the basement. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some context. Then I'll share how I'm eating morning, pre-workout, post-workout, nighttime. And this morning I had a bowl of blueberries with table sugar and honey. And then I took a half an apple, drizzled some honey and sugar on that, and then I had 6 ounces of tart cherry juice. And guys, usually after cardio in the morning, I'm usually getting a crash. Like I'm literally, I mean, I didn't go in the sauna today. I think a lot of times that has a lot to do with it. You sit in that sauna for like 30 minutes, really heating up. It can, after you get out, you feel really tired. But I just noticed that I'm always getting a little bit of an energy dip post-workout, and I'm a big intermittent faster because it's just easier for adherence. I mean, you don't have to fast to get great results. I just like it because it makes adherence easier. But with that being said, I always get a crash, a slight crash that I push through, and usually with a cup of coffee. And on this plan, the whole idea is that you don't need the coffee anymore because your energy goes through the roof. And after I ate this meal, I mean, I'm doing this video right now after I ate it. I feel amazing. Like I had 0 crash today. Now, it's only day 1, right? So we'll see what happens here. I'm just keeping an open mind and I'm going to give this a shot. So what am I going to eat next? Well, I'm going to have 2 pieces of fruit before my workout, probably a half hour to 45 minutes. I'll probably have a banana and an apple. That's going to be my pre-workout. So 0 fats and 0 protein for my first 2 meals of the day. All sugar, okay? Then post-workout, now I'm going to start bringing in protein, but it's all going to be super lean protein sources. So here's my typical day, AM berries with honey or sugar or fruit, right? 3 to 4 hours later, 2 pieces of fruit, pre-workout, and then I'm going to go right into lean meat or fish with starch. Okay, so I'm going to have a starch. If you are very overweight and not active, you probably want to forego this starch and just stay with sugars from fruits and other sources that are faster releasing than starches, because starches could slow down the fat loss if you're not a high performer and you don't exercise intensely. I'm going to bring in rice, potatoes, and root vegetables for my dinner with lean protein. So we talk about protein sources being low-fat meds, right? So I always talk about get your meds in every meal: meat, eggs, dairy, and seafood. So we want lean meat, we want egg whites, we want low to no-fat dairy, and seafood out the ass. I mean, shrimp, scallops, stuff like that, 0 fat in that stuff, all pure protein. Salmon obviously has a little more fat. But so anyway, back up here. So I'm going to have those 2 to pieces of fruit pre-workout, and then post-workout, right? Lean meat with starch. And by the way, vegetables are fine as well. You can have starchy vegetables on this. There's no fat in those, right? Just don't want to drizzle the olive oil on it. Got to stay away from the fats. That's what leads to the fat storage, because our body stores fat as fat. And then dessert, after dinner, I'll have a low-fat protein shake or pudding with fruit added to it. Or I might even have like Frosted Flakes with whey protein powder and water dumped over top of it. Every single night, I'll have that. And I'm just going to see what happens here over the next couple weeks. And then maybe I'll have low-fat Greek yogurt or cottage cheese as well. And so pre-bed, if I'm still hungry, I'm going to go ahead and snack on some sugary treat that has low fat in it. So low-fat Taleni ice cream or low-fat sherbet, believe it or not. I don't know if I spelled this the right way. There it is, sherbet. So carb sources are all fruits, potatoes, rice, peas, carrots, beets, oats. Again, we want to stay more with fruits if you have a lot of weight to lose. I'm already around 12% body fat, so I'm just going to use this diet to try to get me under 10%. And then protein sources are low-fat meds, like I mentioned. Lean meat, eggs, egg whites, low to no-fat dairy, and seafood. Now, the whole idea of this plan is that I'm still going to hit around 150 grams of protein a day. I'm just going to be backloading that protein. So instead of carb backloading, I'm going to protein backload. I'm going to have all my protein in the afternoon, and before bed, I'm going to try to hit around 150 grams. And doing that with just eating meat or no to low-fat dairy can be hard. So definitely going to be having at least 1 protein shake a day, because it's just going to make it easier for me to hit my mark to protect that lean muscle. Now, the other thing that happens, because you're backloading protein with sugary carbs, glycogen's always full. So if you want to wake up and train fasted, you're going to feel like $1,000,000 because you're not carb depleted from being on keto or paleo. That's the problem with these diets, is they have so much fat in it, it's hard to bring in starches without fat storage. And of course, this can affect overall performance. I mean, there are the genetic freaks out there that can run solely on ketones and go right into ketosis and live like a super disciplined life. But at the end of the day, for 95% of us, that shit is not sustainable. None of us are ever going to be able to adhere to that. And then the problem happens too with this insulin sensitivity issue. You do it for extended periods of time, and now when you do want to bring carbs back in, you're effed because you screwed up your insulin sensitivity because now your cells are so insensitive to glucose. Again, I'll share more about this in future videos. So hopefully, I know I went on a long rant here over 20 minutes. If you're still hanging in there, I'm grateful you're listening to me. I just kind of want to report what's going on in my life and what I'm going to do here. And this gives me some good content to film. So I'll be sharing more videos as I progress here. Day 1, going to be in the books, but I'm going to go ahead and grind this out for 2 or 3 weeks and take pictures, and I'll be back on to share it with you guys. If you got something out of this, do me a favor. Hit a like, share the love, drop a comment if you have questions. Thanks for watching, and God bless.